Hello and welcome to a new episode of Talking Snooker with Phil Haig and Nick Metcalf. Once again, talking about the game we all love.
We are. Hello, everybody. And what a week it's been. The Masters. We've been talking about it for a long time. It's come and gone. And it was good stuff, wasn't it?
It was great stuff. Brilliant, brilliant addition, Phil. I have to say, just so good for the game, isn't it? I mean, it's just one of those where I'm not going to say all the Masters will, is ever going to hit a bad patch, but you're struggling to see how now with that setting, if you know what I mean. Those crowds. I mean, listen, I spoke to a lot of people when I was there, and what really struck me, Phil, is a number of first timers. That
Right.
really, really struck me. First or second, but a lot of first. And I've got to say it, not many, if any, were saying we won't come back here. They all loved it. It was brilliant, and maybe I'll say a bit more about that later. But just thoroughly brilliant week for the sport, and a thoroughly brilliant week, of course, for Shaun Murphy. We have to say congratulations, don't we, Phil? At the age of 42, for the second time, a Masters champion. It's lucky for Shaun when the year ends in five. World champion in '05, Masters champion in 15, now Masters champion in 25. I know there's some talk around that he's underachieved in the sport. I said a while back, I think it's gone. I think it's further gone now. Multiple Masters champion, and I think you expressed it very well on social media. When that man is playing well, he is just, I'm going to use Steve Davis's words from one of his matches, almost getting towards unplayable.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there was a good spell with Davis and Hendry on together. And they were saying when you watch him playing well, it's hard to imagine him missing. And a lot of these top guys, you could sort of say the same, but it's just the way he looks around the table, his cue action. Um, just absurdly good. And it's just the inconsistency, isn't it? I think it's how good his peak is why people think he maybe should have won more. Because when he's playing well, it's hard to imagine him not winning. And it just comes and goes. And he said himself maybe he's taken on a bit too much over his career in terms of shots. But yeah, when they're all flying in, and they were this week, what a watch it is. And he was so entertaining to watch all the way through. Um, Brilliant stuff. Uh, yeah, I spoke to Dennis Taylor before the tournament, 2 days before the tournament, I think, or maybe one day. And he'd just done an exhibition with Sean, and he said, "Oh, Sean Murphy's playing really well." But then he also tips Mark Allen, and then by the end, he'd also tipped Neil Robertson. So I didn't know what to believe from Dennis, but he was right about Sean. He was playing very well.
I heard that word stomp, and I thought, yeah, he does really. He stomps around that arena, or any arena when he's playing well. This week it was Ali Pali, like he owns the place, but in a brilliant way. He's knocking everything in, looking like he won't miss. I mean, he had a few sort of sticky-ish moments, but not really. I mean, it was quite reminiscent of 15. I look back at 15, and he had a decider against Selby in the first. That was obviously playing a great, great player. Could have gone either way. But after that, he romped to it, and he won that final against Robertson a lot easier. But I did ask Shaun on Sunday night. I made a specific example of saying to him, I know we're a bit hung up sometimes on what's better, what's best, but I just wanted him to compare his two Masters wins. He thought, no, he played better in this. He said 15 was really good. I think 15 should be forgotten, which sometimes it is. It is when things just happen compared to something a decade ago. He was excellent then, but he said when you take everything into account, the maximum which we'll come to, the 4 centuries in the final, he said no, this was hard to beat. He beat Kyren Wilson, didn't he? 10-7 in the final. I'll get your sort of views on it, Phil. Very good, I thought. I think we've been spoilt with both Triple Crown finals this season now. Trump and Hawkins at the UK was very good. So was this. Shaun was 6-2 ahead after the first session, went to 8-4, and then maybe I'll let you take over. 8-4, we thought, oh, tell you what, who knows, maybe an early night. Kyrie having none of that, was he? Came right back.
Yeah, in some ways, it was a bit similar to that UK final, wasn't it? As in, you thought someone was firmly in control, and it really was made to be very interesting, but felt a bit different because Trump was such a clear favourite. It felt like the underdog coming back, but it was the underdog coming back, where I suppose Kyron was the favourite going into this, but not by much because Sean was playing the better stuff going into it, really. But Kyron's obviously world champion, had a better season. So it was a beautifully poised final. But yeah, Murphy just so strong early on. The fight and never say die spirit that you always expect from Kyron, he showed it. And it's not just, sometimes we talk about these battling qualities, it sort of diminishes the actual skill qualities, isn't it? It's not all about tenacity. You got to play really well as well, and he did. Came back. It could have been, yeah. He said afterwards, didn't he? It could have been 8-8 if he missed a red to middle, I think, as far as I remember. But I think even when he was coming back there, Murphy wasn't really faltering. Um, he looked pretty solid all the way through. I spoke to Judd Trump today, actually, we'll mention that later, but he said he felt even at 8-7. I think his words were Shaun had some more up his sleeve if he needed it, and he had it. It was there, and finished it beautifully with that turn. Um, so yeah, just not faultless. Nothing's faultless throughout the tournament. Even in that first round, Kyren Wilson came back at him a bit, but very very strong throughout. And he's not been in a Triple Crown finals for a little while. They're certainly not regular at this stage of his career. But when he walked out there and made a 90 odd in the first, he was not fussed by it at all, was he? So it was just thoroughly impressive and really good to watch.
Yeah, absolutely, Phil. And what I thought about it was not that it really bothers me or matters that much when you get a tournament which nags at you. You think, oh, there was this moment. Not what it was was it the right result totally? Because ultimately, after a week's tournament, the winner's the winner, and you have to give them immense credit. But things like, for example, when Williams didn't beat Robertson in that semi a few years ago, it was sort of outrageous in some ways. That happens, but there was nothing outrageous about this week. It was just general excellence from Murphy and the right winner, and that was great. As you say, Murphy was in control, just a bit more on that 94, 65, 134, 116 breaks in the afternoon. Then it was tit for tat, generally good scoring for both of them. And Wilson played well to come from, 8-4 to 8-7. It was quick as well, helped by breaks of 76 and 65. Then you mentioned the judge saying Shaun having something up his sleeve. He had a 55 up his sleeve for 9-7 and then at 100 exactly to seal the deal. He said, didn't he? He wasn't sure his days of winning those big ones would come again. And he naturally would think that. It's been, obviously 10 years since the last Masters, but that's 10 years since any Triple Crown. Oh, this is obviously his fourth. So, you would imagine why he would think that. But he does say this new partnership with Peter Ebdon has been important. These are some quotes said. He says, before the partnership with Peter, which is only 3 tournaments old, I totally lost my self-belief. I might have given off the impression that I was the confident person everybody knows, but I thought the days of potentially winning tournaments like this, events like this, that are different and a league of their own, I thought they were gone. It was working with Peter that helped me remember that I can do this. So obviously a great snooker man, Ebdon, he must have worked wonders. And it sounds like we've sort of hinted at this before, with people that kind of take those roles. It's often the mental side, isn't it? So it seems like he's sort of saying, yeah, I'll give you a bit of belief, Shaun. Maybe you almost like you should have it. You won so much in the game, but maybe sometimes we heard this from Terry Griffiths a lot over the years, people that work with him. You need to have that, use that word gravitas of like an Ebdon, who's a former world champion, of course, to give Shaun that belief. And he's obviously very quickly been instrumental.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And it sounded like that. I was just listening to Shaun on his podcast, and he was saying it's nothing technical really. It's just knowing the odd word when to say it and when not to say things, and just give you a boost. And yeah, and you're right. It's because it is someone of Peter's standing in the game. Um, that makes it all worthwhile and to Shaun. And it's interesting. I think these coaches just they click with some people, don't click with others. Peter worked with Jack Lisowski for quite a while. Jack always said he was enjoying it and he was appreciating the work and stuff. It didn't really bear any fruit in terms of getting Jack to the next level. Similarly, at the minute, I think Lee Walker's taken on loads of people having worked with just Mark Williams. It's not necessarily going to work with all of them at all. Even though Lee's a great coach, clearly, but it's just because these things are quite personal and you need the specific relationship to click. And yeah, I mean it's a small sample size, but it's very impressive so far between Ebdon and Murphy. So yeah, we'll see how long it lasts, but it's looking good for him.
Yeah, indeed. A word from each of us, perhaps about Kyren's words afterwards in his speech. I mean, I'll be honest. I was recording, some of my own audio for Radio Snooker, and so I didn't really follow it as it happens. I didn't have that instant reaction in myself. I sort of saw them more in print, really, which is maybe a bit different. And the old man now for Shaun is just a total joke. I mean, that's just completely a joke as far as I'm concerned, and quite a funny one. And it's not true. Shaun's only 42. He's not an old man at all, but he's an old man compared to Kyren. That's just a joke. I mean, he also said a lot of players would be envious of his family unit. Now, using off that phrase sample size earlier, I wouldn't have had an enormous sample size of reaction to that, but I certainly seen, on some forums. This is obviously on, online, that not everyone thought that was great. I mean, I'm very sensitive with things like family matters generally, and I think people have to be careful with their words. Maybe in an ideal world, he'd have phrased that slightly differently. And let's say that. I mean, some people have lost parents, for example. Some people, you know, have difficulties in their marriage, or they're now not married. I don't really think for a minute Kyren was kind of thinking of that as any way kind of a slight on anyone else. He maybe could have phrased that sentence a bit differently. But if I'm honest with you, I'm a little surprised that some have been so offended by it. I wasn't really.
Yeah, listening to it, I wasn't fussed at the time by the whole thing. Certainly the joke. I know Kyra and Sean know each other well, and the old man thing was a full joke, and you could see Sean laughing about it. And the whole speech sort of was quite well received in the arena. I watched it back today, and everyone was laughing. Rob said great, very graciously said, and Sean said the same. So there was no problem out there. But yeah, I think that the family comment was probably the one he could have phrased differently. And I think, having spoken to Kyron quite a lot, I think he does just he's not really saying the wrong thing. He's not making the wrong point. He just uses the wrong words sometimes, and just sort of doesn't quite express himself how he might want to. I think. I mean, I don't want to put words in his mouth saying this, but yeah. So maybe that's why I heard it, and I didn't think too much of it. But I can see why people thought it was a bit weird thing to say, because it sounded like maybe he was sort of thinking of specific people that would think that. But I don't know. Don't want to like put words into his mouth, as I said. But yeah, it was. I think he could have phrased it better. That's fair. But at the same time, you know, it wasn't. I wasn't outrageously offended by it at all.
And I think also, when people say things in life, I mean, the way I look at it is you've got to take their character into account generally.
Yeah,
Like it, not let's take Kyren out of it. If someone made you know, a comment, you think that's a bit funny, and they were generally off about lots of things. You think, oh, well, that's in context. But I mean, Kyren couldn't be a greater bloke, could he? In so many ways. I mean, we only know him as journalists, but just in that role, I've seen him so many times in life. He's a great ambassador, just a very fine person, actually, a very fine man. So I think, contextualizing things is important. And that's the sort of what I would add to that as well. And so maybe should we move on to another name, and the most famous name of all, Phil, which is Ronnie O'Sullivan. He pulled out, didn't he, 2 days before the tournament for medical reasons. I mean, he cut a frustrated figure at the Championship League, didn't he? And that's sort of putting it mildly. It ended up with a smash cue in the bin, actually. So not just a metaphorical thing; it's a literal thing. It's a cue in the bin. I mean, that's what Ronnie was feeling. He said on Eurosport a few days later, "I've been on a 3-week trip away playing, and I just think I exhausted myself. A lot of pressure while I was away. The build-up of all that just got a bit too much, really. I lost the plot of the Championship League and snapped my cue. So that's unplayable. So I knew at that moment in time the right decision was to not play, and such a big tournament. I thought whoever was to come in should have at least a couple of days' notice." I mean, I think not everybody, of course, everyone had different views. Some people were a lot more cynical about it. And the way I expressed it elsewhere is I think it's easy for some, probably, and was, to take that view. Well, you didn't, have a problem going to Saudi Arabia. There's always a sort of cynical element you can take to it, or other big money events, or China, or your tour. But look, I think when you're when you suffer from mental health issues, I think it's a day-to-day thing potentially. It could be an hour-to-hour thing, actually. So the idea that he was fine, or seemingly better one week or one day and then not the next, he clearly wasn't in a very good place, and I think that's right to say that. And I think he probably will know himself better than anybody a lot of the time, and knows, in this particular example, we saw that, didn't we? Let's talk about that Eurosport discussion, and very good one. They rightly got a lot of credit for it with him and Mark Selby. I mean, Ronnie, in every sense, before the event in the Championship League, and then at the Masters when he was talking, did come across as a player that, in so many ways, wasn't really fit to play in the Masters.
Yeah, and I think that point you made about hour by hour is right because I think he said himself, if on Sunday someone said to you, "Are you ready to play?" I think he probably said he would have been, but he hadn't felt like that before. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's such a personal thing, isn't it? Like what people are going through in their mind. And when he said about how he felt at the Championship League and he smashed up his cue, and I think Jimmy had saying stuff about how he's a perfectionist and stuff. And people, I saw some comments saying like, "Oh, he just wasn't playing well and didn't want to get beat," but it's not. That's nowhere near as simple as that at all. Clearly, someone, any snooker player smashing up the cue is an extremely extreme reaction, and that wasn't a new cue. That was one he's been playing with for years. It was, he's won a lot of things with it. So yeah, that showed what sort of position he was in at the time, and he felt he couldn't play. So you know, it's the same as a physical injury. If yeah, he could have. If you got a if you got a physical injury that literally doesn't stop you going out there and playing, but you don't think you can play to anything like your standard. Do you go and do it anyway, or do you pull out and give someone else a go? So that's how he felt at the time. Fair enough. And actually, I think it was quite brave of him to go and front up and speak about it live on TV and then stay at Eurosport for quite a number of sessions over the tournament. And he was in good form in that. I think he was very sort of thoughtful and analytical, and that stuff with Selby was absolutely brilliant. So, yeah, it was a shame. It was no bad replacement in Neil Robertson, and we got some value out of him anyway on the telly. So, fair play. And he made some encouraging comments about how he wants to get back playing as soon as possible. And I might be completely wrong here, but in my mind, just the way he said that made me think we might see him a lot in the second half of the season, and even in tournaments that you may otherwise not expect him to play. Maybe that's just the vibe I got from how he said it. But yeah, so we'll see him again soon, and hopefully this having a little break from playing might have done him good.
Interesting thoughts there. Yeah, I didn't think that thing about he might play a lot, but now you say it, I can see why that might be the case, and the way you might have thought that. What I did think was this might end up being the best thing for some time for him to have a definitive, because he did actually pull out the Masters once before, didn't he, in relatively recent times, but ultimately across a career of more than 30 years, it's still a big deal, even if you're Ronnie, to pull out the Triple Crown, to pull out the Masters, which he's owned over the years, won it 8 times. Um, I know he pulls out of a lot of events and often late, but that in a way didn't lessen this as a story for me. It really was big, and I don't think he does that lightly. And I think that for me, it just could end up being one of the best things that's happened to him for a while. We'll only know that come the spring. He really could. This could almost be a bit of a stop and then a start again moment. And sometimes they can be very helpful. Let's see. A word though again about Eurosport. What I thought is, I'm not saying that a discussion like that could never happen on the BBC, because we've seen good discussions on the BBC in the past, but at that length, I think it's unlikely. And that's not even against the B, they just don't have that time. So that's the benefit of channel specific and sport specific channels, I really think. And I also have to say, O'Sullivan and Selby spoke brilliantly, and it was the best at snooker, actually. But I also think credit must go to Radzi Chinyanganya and Alan McManus. Both, of course, have been guests, and Radzi only in recent weeks on this podcast. They understood the art of when not to speak, Phil, and that can sometimes be important, as important as the art to speak. And they would have made good points, I'm sure, salient points, but backing away, letting those two take over, I think was absolutely vital. And it was a good discussion. I mean, the only thing I would say is, and I've done this myself over the years, I'm sure we all have in whatever roles in the media we have, you hit on a good thing and then you sort of go a little bit further and far, and you think, oh, everything in the next day or two will be good. And I didn't think a couple of the later contributions the next day or two were as useful. The way I think of it is, not everyone suffers from bad mental health. And thank heavens that's what I took from subsequent discussions. But yeah, Ronnie and Mark so open, and I think went beyond snooker. It was, and I'm sure many people would have seen that weren't involved with snooker actually, because it's so widely shared. And as I often think with things like that, it was the benefit of Ronnie and Mark, I'm sure, for other snooker players, for other pundits, but in a way, sort of for all of us, because couldn't we all, in to lesser or greater degrees, relate to some of the things that were being said? I thought it was absolutely invaluable.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because I feel like it's almost constant messages. Like it's good to talk about things. It helps to talk about things, but um, that's a lot easier said than done. And to watch those two sort of chat about it so openly live on telly,
Mm.
when they're not like best mates by any stretch, but clearly they felt comfortable enough with each other to chat about it in that way, and that was all part of the encouraging part of it. That it wasn't. It didn't look too hard for them to do, and it should be easy for people to do the same if they feel like they need to. Um, and yeah, it was just really good. And yeah, I agree with you. And this was no fault of other people, but I mean, everyone has mental health, whether it's good or bad. But I think when you ask people about it who don't really suffer from it, it's immediately obvious by how they talk about it. Even if it's not the same thing, they're slightly just more aware of it. And yeah, sometimes asking people who don't struggle with it probably doesn't offer much help much helpful insight. Weirdly, this is a bit well, it's not really a tangent. I interviewed Phil Taylor the other day, and I know he's sort of he's mates with Ronnie O'Sullivan, and I was asking how he dealt with the pressure of being at the top of the sport for so long, similar sort of situations, and you could tell just by his reaction that he just never had suffered with anything like that. Because I was saying like, how did you cope with being the man to beat for 30 years? And he was just like, "No, I just looked at my first round draw. Really didn't have to look, didn't try not to look who I'd play in the quarterfinals or anything like that. And it was just nothing like deeper than just played darts lots, really." So, and that was really interesting in itself that he could just be so sort of single-minded and think about things quite simply, which must have been great for him. But clearly, Ronnie and people like that, and the opposite end, everything is not straightforward. So yeah, no, it was fascinating to listen to, and I hope it helped people. Um, and I mean, one thing I would say is, the big talk became about, there should be someone on hand all the time, like a doctor on
Mm.
hand.
Yeah,
Why
of
isn't
course.
there? And obviously, it's easy to sort of make these suggestions, and it sounds great, obviously, but there's a lot of practical issues in the way of that. We've been at snooker tournaments. If you were there for, say, the home nations, the game start at 10 in the morning and finish at one in the morning, don't they? If you needed a doctor there, paying like a full-time psychiatrist to be there from 9 a.m. till 2 a.m. all day, every time there's a tournament on, would be tricky. But yeah, I think Jason Ferguson and Shaun Murphy spoke about the help that is on hand at the minute. And obviously, if this discussion creates more discussion about how that can be improved or helped, then great. But yeah, I think sometimes these suggestions can be made, and then there's a big pile on, like, yeah, why don't Will Snooker do this? And yeah, hopefully they're talking about it, but I don't think they're sort of underperforming in that front because they haven't got someone there all the time, like was suggested.
Well, fair enough. And as usual, you have great words to say on there, Phil, and very eloquently. So let's talk about the actual matches, shall we? Day one first. Neil Robertson, John Higgins. Well, Robertson was 5-1 down. Brilliant gag, by the way, when he arrived with Rachel Casey. I haven't bought my
Yeah,
cue.
superb.
Bloody love that. Deadpan.
It
Great
was so
deadpan.
believable.
Oh,
That's
it
why it was so
was.
good.
Of
I
course it
fell for
was.
it.
Of course it was. Because he does go to the wrong venues and stuff. It was brilliantly done. Oh, Robertson 6-5 coming back from 5-1 down. John Higgins was broken, wasn't he? I'm afraid. He was better in some interviews than others, but he was really downhearted. And I've been in rooms with John like that. It's bad, and it keeps happening to him. What I would say is, he is sometimes making the odd mistake, that red on the middle, yes, but he is losing the good performances as well. These guys that come from behind, they keep playing really well. I've got to say that. And again, example here with Neil. Elsewhere that night, Shaun Murphy 6, Gary Wilson 3. Yeah, you mentioned this earlier. Actually, Wilson came back from 4-0 down to 4-3, but then Murphy got the job done. Day two, I was in the arena for the end of this one. Ding Junhui 6, Mark Williams 5. I found myself doing stuff around. I do that so much now. I do so much around the snooker. I think I've got to watch the snooker sometimes, but it didn't really happen that afternoon. Didn't really see the start of it, but I heard it was harder work. I was in there from 4-4, so I saw three cracking frames. I mean, Mark, how he won that next one, I never know. Then Dean won the last two. He did get some run. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we'll talk about another player that got even more amazing run later. It's a bit hammy talking about run and luck. I remember David Hendon once when he was on with us saying you can't really weigh it. I think the way he put it, I thought that's a good way of saying, yeah, you can't weigh luck. I was saying that about credit the other day. You can't weigh credit. But, I think, well, that was a lot. I mean, Ding played three or four madly erratic shots, like whack the balls around the table, left nothing. And I could see, you get more when you're there. Of course you do. Mark's sort of constant facial reactions were, he just couldn't believe it. He found it so unfathomable that he was being left nothing time after time in those last two frames. But that's the way it goes. And it's a great Ding played some good stuff as well. Good winner, good match. I think we all thought, 6-5, didn't we? I can't think of a pundit that didn't say that would go to it. Either 10 or 11. I was disappointed with Ali Carter that night, and I'm a big Ali man. 6-1 to Mark Selby. Mark played well, yeah, but I could be wrong. But the way I saw it, I just don't think Ali had that 100% application towards the end. I thought he was playing quickly. I thought, so easy from the armchair, of course, but I thought his shoulders drooped a bit, and I thought he was a beaten man a bit before he ought to have been. And I saw, and listen, everyone's different, but I saw a couple of people point out, I sort of agreed with this. Had it been Selby in that position, he'd have still thought he'd win the match. But listen, everyone's different. But I was just, when you think about how Ali Carter working with Chris Henry and what have you, I thought, not the match is there for the winning, but the match is there for the getting back into. But he never seemed to quite seem like he believed it himself. Anyway, day three, Judd Trump 6, Barry Hawkins 1. Really strong from Judd, century and three half centuries. I was there again for Mark Hannon 6, Siege White 2. I thought the Green Bay said this well on social media. A bit of a lesson from Alan, and I think that's a good way of saying it, actually. And by the way, I'll let you go first in the quarterfinals. I feel like I'm hogging this, actually. I'm taking all the points here, aren't I? You can add all the points on the quarterfinal. Day 4, Kyren Wilson 6, Zhang Anda 4. And didn't really see a lot of that. But I did look at the scoring and I thought, that's funny. Zhang made the three highest breaks, including a 1-4-1. Mad sort of thing, really, but lost 6-4. Then Luca Bussell 6, Chris Wakelin 3. Good win for Luca, but I think it's fair to say Chris has had other more important things going on in his life right now. He spoke to you about it in an interview about the premature birth of his daughter. We, of course, wish Chris and his partner well. Maybe that's the way you want to start if you want, but loads to talk about there. 8, obviously, in their own different ways. That's interesting matches. Some of them absolutely compelling, and we were halfway through and just thought already, what a masters.
Yeah, there was some really great stuff. Yeah, word for Chris. Really tough time to be making your Masters debut. Obviously, he fits himself well. He said himself he didn't play great, but he didn't look overawed by the situation or anything. But more importantly, like best wishes for his family. Chris's daughter was born 8 weeks early, so scary times for him. But I think they're on the right path and hopefully all going well now. Out of that other stuff, yeah, Ali Carter actually said, I think it might have been with Rachel on Eurosport. He said even coming into the match, he just knew he wasn't playing well enough and didn't think he was going to win, which was a remarkable thing to say from anyone, but especially someone like Ali Carter. But yeah, there were
No,
a few
I didn't
downbeat
see that.
interviews. Yeah, it was surprisingly strong on that front. Obviously, like you said, John was very down. Gary Wilson's interview afterwards as well was he was sort of suggesting his time at the top's coming to an end, which he's a very streaky player, but you wouldn't be surprised if he comes back very strongly at some point. But yeah, he was downbeat as well. Um, yeah, but it was a weird one in terms of I think all 8 favourites won. There were a couple of very close ones. I think Ding and Williams will have been near enough 50-50. And a couple of more similar in there, but no big shot. No significant shocks really. I think we said before they're not real shocks, but no sets with the bookmakers, none at all. So that's why we got such a strong quarterfinal lineup, which was an interesting one because I can't remember what the year was. It's the first quarter-final lineup with no class of '92 for a long time. But at the same time, people were saying it's the strongest quarter-final lineup they've seen for a long time. So I suppose that's encouraging for snooker. Can move on without those three to an extent, but it was very strong. Shaun Murphy, Neil Robertson, Mark Allen versus Mark Selby, Judd Trump versus Ding Junhui, and Kyren Wilson versus Luke Purcell. They were all real no miss occasions, really. It was excellent. And yeah, started on. What did it start with? It started with Shaun Murphy versus Neil Robertson, didn't it?
Yeah.
And yeah, very, very strong. I mean, Neil didn't do a lot wrong to lose by 4 frames there. And really, the talking point, of course, is the fluffed maximum attempt from Shaun Murphy.
Oh
Fluff's maybe a
yeah.
hard word. The final frame, 15 reds, 15 blacks. Slightly the wrong position to be finished on the final black, but I mean, he said it himself. Anywhere but there, anywhere but where he finished behind the blue. Had no shot on the yellow, which looked devastating, but obviously we'll come to how it wasn't so devastating later. Um, Mark Allen 6, Mark Selby 2. Quite a weird match. That looked like it was going to go. Always looked sounded like it was going to be go late. It went quite late, but only with 8 frames. Um, I think it started off quite quick. I was there for this one. The first 3 frames were all one visits, and then there were three in a row, really long, really slow, stodgy frames. And Alan won all three, two on the black. So that was the match done. Really, Selby made. Um, he was going to like blast himself back into rhythm. I think he made a nice 80, but then Alan got over the line in the next one. Then that was a Friday afternoon, wasn't it? Judd Trump 6, Ding Junhui 3. Trump looked amazing there. Ding actually went 2-0 and 3-1 up. And then Judd Trump went mad. Five very quick, very big breaks, and just looked unstoppable at that point. And then Kyren and Luca on Friday night to complete the quarterfinals with quite a weird game, really. Kyren had picked up an ankle injury in his sleep because he'd gone to bed in a tucked in quilt. It's just bizarre stuff. Um,
Brilliant. I saw you, didn't you? Yeah, I saw you tee up on social media. Yeah, got injured by a well tucked in quilt. I mean,
yeah,
we've all been injured by a well tucked in quilt, but most of us don't say it.
no, there was a hilarious bit on Eurosport where Kyron was saying himself like, "Oh, it's the least rock and roll injury. It's not cool at all." And then I think Radzi mentioned to Jimmy, said, "Oh, didn't Alex Higgins play a tournament with a broken ankle once?" And Jimmy was like, "Yeah, but that was quite a cool story. He'd like fallen out of a first floor window from an off." It was very much a more rock and roll story than I went to bed and slept up with a sore foot. But fair play to Kyron, he battled through it because he was clearly in some pain, and he had some real complaints about Lucas chalk. I know it's quite boring this chalk chat, but the triangle chalk, I don't know if it's part of Lucas' plan, and Ronnie uses it as well. But opponents really are bothered by it, and Kyron didn't like it. But he got over the line and into the semis to set up two great semis. Obviously, the Shaun Murphy Mark Allen one, which had a bit of a storyline behind it, and then the Kyron against Judd. The rivalry of the season and potentially for years to come. So lovely setup in the final four.
It was a lovely setup, and you described those quarterfinals brilliantly. But I do want to mention the Mark Allen luck a bit, and
Oh, sorry, yeah.
the reason is honestly, it was about 8 shots out of 10. It was extraordinary. Everything he was doing, it was like, no. And of course, Mark had a lovely reaction in the end, didn't he? Went to whacking one with the cue, whereas Mark did. Like Mark Allen was a better player in the match. That's important to say. I think he'd have won it without that luck. But yeah, he did get a bit. But you're right, we're set up for the semi-finals, and wow. I watched Shaun Murphy's maximum on the central line. I mean, talk about things that aren't glamorous, Phil. I mean, this is very London centric, but the central line is obviously on the underground, and I think it might be the most, maybe not the most underground, but it's certainly amazing that you can watch stuff on there. And I'm like, well, I
I
am.
think it might be the deepest
I
one.
think it
It's
might
like
be
the
the
hottest
deepest
one.
one. It certainly is the hottest one. Yeah, of a sauna, and well, it, Henry used the word straightforward during it, but it was so far out. It's like, well, take away the pressure of a 147. I was starting to think, I can't see a way he won't do this. It was like shelling peas. It was just little screw shots, little stun shots. Just a brilliant, brilliant effort. And So pleased for him. First one of the Triple Crown event. I was surprised when I heard that. I thought it must be, oh, yeah, of course. They're ninth overall. And just a lovely story. And by the way, you documented, I must say, you got a bit of praise when I was there. We didn't have paths didn't cross. We were like shits in the night, but you were getting quite a bit of praise for your documentation of their friendship. You were like a tenacious one with that, demanding to know when happened what. And what I'm glad about it was I didn't hear that hammy old thing that I was going to fear that it's just all banter. Now, of course, it wasn't, and the friendship has cooled. But listen, they've also spoken professionally about it, and you know, Mark Allen, for example, says no animosity. Made a point of saying that. Gave him a nice bit of congratulations for the 147. And just Murphy carrying on playing so well generally, wasn't it? Beating Allen 6-3. Allen was, very good. So it was a very good win. And then Kyren Wilson 6, Judd Trump 3. Breaks of 61, 89, 60, 76, 88, 85, and 106 from Kyren. I'm probably reading too much into it, but I couldn't believe that 21% only went for Kyren in the poll I did of 300 odd people. I mean, listen, Judd was playing brilliantly, but it just, the lack of faith people have in the world champion is kind of amazing for someone of that status. But listen, that happened. He's not got the Indian side over Judd, really. I wouldn't say that. Judd beat him handsomely in the UK semis just gone, but he's got a nice habit of beating him, building up, eh?
Yeah, because that's the fourth time they played this season, and Byron's won three and all in really big matches, two finals and then a Masters semi. Obviously, Judd's one was big as well, so yeah, it's just great stuff. It was very strange when Judd won that mad long frame where they both got so many points to go 3-2 ahead. Um, that looked like it would have really hurt, and then he really sort of didn't do a lot from that. When I spoke to him today, he said he just felt strangely flat after that. And it's just, he said it was just fine margins, Byron missed a few and they landed awkward for him. But Judd did then start missing people found the mid-range ones that would normally go in. So it did peter out for him a bit, and a little bit concerningly against, his, biggest sporting rival at the minute in a big tournament. But he didn't seem fussed when I spoke to him. Well, he was fussed. That's not the right word, but he wasn't down by it. He was winning matches at the Championship League a couple of days later. But yeah, no, I think it was just because Judd played so well, and Kyren sort of battled through that weird injury in a strange match with Luca that Judd seems an obvious favourite. But it's so hard to keep your form even over a week. That's why when a performance like this week, Shaun can sort of rampage through the tournament looking so good, it's really difficult to do. Um, Getting up and down, sort of highs and lows, even over a week. Judd was. Well, I spoke to him after he beat Ding, and he was really like buzzing about how well he played and his prospects in the coming this week and what's to come. And he was clearly delighted. And then you've got to get going again. And of course, it's a Masters semi-final. It's not hard to get up for, but it's not. You just can't play well every day. I think Alan McManus says that all the time, doesn't he? Give me the guy who played well yesterday. And it's not always true because I say Shaun Murphy played well every day, but sometimes it is the case. You can't keep it up all the time. So that was the case with Judd. But a couple of interesting semis really, and setting up what was a fascinating final, which, as I said, Kyren was just about favourite for, but not by much, which is how you like a final to be set up, pretty level.
Absolutely, that one was 51-49 on my poll. I've forgotten which way it was now, but it was that close. It may have been 51 for Kyren, but yeah, no, it was that was anyone's really. I had no strong thoughts about that really. I thought if Shaun maybe hit the levels, he'd probably win, but Kyren's so good at just winning big matches now. He's just won a world final. He's won two finals this season. He wins finals a lot of the time. But yeah, it wasn't surprised. I was surprised it was 8-4 actually. I wasn't
Yeah.
seeing that really either way. But then obviously Kyren made it close. As you say, there were similarities between that and the UK final. And actually, when you were talking about the semi and Judd sort of falling away, I know it was a different pattern of scoring, but it wasn't dissimilar to their UK semi because Kyren did nothing in the UK semi from. I mean, it was 2-0, but I think Judd went next two. But from the interval onwards, 2-2 at the UK semi, Kyren wasn't in the match really. So he kind of fell away in the same sort of way. That was a really disappointing one, the UK. I didn't think this one was quite as disappointing. It was obviously closer. And the patterns were interesting 2-0, and the other one 1-3, the other one 1-4. That's what, Rod Stubb made us miss momentum, Phil, but most of us don't. And that's kind of what happened there. Kyren just got ahead of steam up and wouldn't be denied. And then, as we say, the final, Shaun Murphy 10, Kyren Wilson 7. Should have broken before now, but listen, it's one of the biggest tournaments in the game. There's loads more to talk about. We don't want this to be a marathon, but we have got a lot to get through. And we should say you are listening to the Talking Snooker podcast with Phil Haigh and Nick Metcalf. Phil was saying hearty congratulations to Shaun Murphy, a brilliant winner of the Masters in a thoroughly good tournament. Really good for the game. Very good television coverage across Eurosport and the BBC. Talked about that Eurosport mental health debate, which they're rightly getting a lot of plaudits for, but just generally good coverage. The voices we know, the coverage we got to know so well. BBC, yeah, very strong. Again, it's the difference. Eurosport and ITV, I think, as well, cater more for the committed fan. The BBC has a different role. They have committed fans enjoying it as well, of course, but they are catering also for wider sports fans. And these three tournaments, are still the window onto the sport for so many people. They haven't seen snooker, a lot of people, between May at the end of the world and the UK when it starts in the late part of the autumn. And then the next thing they'll watch is this. And that's the way it goes. I wish that they would tune in for more sometimes, but a lot of people don't. 2 million watching the final. Down on last year, definitely Ronnie tax, but still strong figures in this day and age. And Phil, if the BBC weren't pleased with their viewing figures, I don't think they'd be signing a new deal, which is a 5-year extension. It will stay on the BBC, the Triple Crown events, until 2032. A lot of people are surmising from that means the World Championship will indeed stay on the UK, in the UK. But we will, just say, I think that, the BBC has its faults. The coverage isn't perfect, but we have seen, in my view, and willing to be corrected, is the first time every match. I'd like to say every shot normally, but the direction was so weird at times this week. I have to say, they were missing the odd shot. They really were. In fact, Dennis Taylor once, I made the comment on social media, oh, well, you're missing a black here. The famous one, I should add. But he said, oh, you're missing a black here, but it's important to see this. And I thought, that's never really been how snooker's worked. Maybe that's how it'll go now, but I don't think it's worked. We've never seen replays and missed stuff. Anyway, missed live shots. But anyway, they showed every match. BBC 4 sail on every night. BBC 2 sail on every afternoon. So that's great. And yeah, it'll continue until 32. So a lot more years of those events. And that sort of surmised from that they might not go for other events, which I always think there's room for one or two more on the B, but listen, they got the three most prestigious ones. I know it can be controversial to call them the biggest, but so I know they worded it as the most prestigious. So got to be good news, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it would be. Well, you don't know what would happen if they left the B, but it would certainly be an unknown future. Whereas we know where we are with the BBC, it's done brilliant stuff for the sport and continues to. And I think Barry Hearn made a comment once about just sort of the gravitas that it brings to the sport. I don't know when you're pitching it elsewhere and sort of trying to sell the sport around, and it's the fact it is covered so widely by the BBC, more on the BBC than most sports are covered. So yeah, it is good. The coverage is always always has some great points to it. And whoever's got Stephen Hendry on gets a big
Oh
plus, and
yeah.
because is excellent. Steve, he had a fair few bits with him and Davis on either in commentary or in the studio, and occasionally they just have some amazing little snippets of conversation. There was one, I can't remember what match it was during now, but they were just talking about what they both used to do while they were in the chair while their opponents at the table,
Oh
and it was
yeah.
just fascinating to listen to them talking about that. So yeah, great stuff. Obviously Hazel's amazing. Not going to go through everyone because they're all great, but yeah, no, good news for the sport, it seems. Certainly, yeah, you don't want to read too much into it, but it certainly suggests that everything's staying in the UK. But we'll see. Obviously, if the World Championship left the Crucible and stayed in the UK, that would still be an enormous story. So we'll see. We don't want to read too much into that. But yeah, a good news story in general.
Yeah, and two things that come to my mind while you mention people, and Hendry is, for me, just the master at studying body language and reading a room. He literally reads the room, that man, in that old phrase. One of my favourite bits of commentary for years was the third session of the World Semi in 22. I remember it very well. I was in my Airbnb in Sheffield watching the session on the telly and just thought, God, Hendry was incredible. He sensed every mood in that room, the tension of it, the drama of it. And it reminded me a bit of that this week, reminiscent. He really called that Judd business on Saturday night. He was like, there's something about Judd. And before he was losing all those frames, there's
Mm.
something about Judd. He's ill at ease. He didn't use the phrase ill at ease. That's what I surmised from it. But he was like, it just doesn't seem relaxed, doesn't seem himself. And I thought, sometimes it's easier to sort of talk in generalised terms about matches and players. Oh, he must be feeling the nerves now. Sort of those things that we all sort of say that maybe don't always amount to that much. But Hendry's a great one for saying specific things. I also loved Mark Allen actually talking about Terry Griffiths.
Mm.
The BBC did a lovely tribute to Terry actually. I loved the way he was talking about how Terry would sometimes say to Mark Allen, think about the other guy. Look at the other guy as well. And I thought, yeah, that's probably, I'm not going to say that's what they don't do enough. I'm not a player. That's not right. But I like to hear that a bit. And I thought, yeah, I can really sense that would have been a big deal. They must be sometimes so caught up in themselves. Well, the other guy's going through stuff as well. He's suffering pressure. He's suffering nerves. And I really like the way that I maybe didn't express it very well. You might have to go and look at it. I'm sure it's if you're in the UK, it's still on the iPlayer. It was the first day when the BBC did their Terry Griffiths tribute. I thought Mark Allen spoke brilliantly about the relationship he had with Terry and some of the things that Terry would say to him. And good packages as well, nice packages about the 50 years on the BBC. I wasn't convinced they had quite their timing's quite right. A couple of bits of that, and I was also, it's not a massive deal, but I was surprised they didn't focus more on Wembley Conference Centre as being an amazing venue on that package. It was sort of like, well, that was an amazing place. I wasn't quite convinced they did quite enough on that. But listen, superb tournament, Ali Pally, brilliant. I think there were fewer insects and wasps. Now, I got obsessed by this about halfway through the week. I kept asking, no one else really said, there's definitely fewer. Then people watched every match and said, no, there has been a few. Dominic Dale saying, is that a lace swing? I mean, totally normal sport. What a sport, Phil Haig. Love that. That's a lace swing? Brilliant. And then a wasp to attack Shaun Murphy. But look, I didn't put a call into Rent a Killer or anything. I was going to run a story. Didn't do that. But what I am going to say is that I do think, having spoken to people involved with running the tournament, that the gap between the darts and the snooker was bigger this year. That was a factor.
Right.
I think that was a factor because you know what? Even on my previews, I was thinking this seems like a bit of a longer build up than normal. I had the check last year. It was January the 7th to the 14th, the Masters. I have to say, I don't really mind either way, but I think I prefer it to start on the second weekend. A bit selfishly for us, gives us that little bit longer. And also, they were saying, the dancers out by the third. We weren't starting till the 12th. That little bit longer, that may make a difference. But yeah, really good. Someone told me they're going to add a few more seats again. I think, well, but they were making the point that they now don't see quite how they do that. I mean, listen, I don't design these things, but it is good. And although they're temporary seats, they do one of the best jobs I know in sport of making them not seem temporary, if you know what I mean. I mean, some places you go, I mean, maybe outdoor ones, an unfair comparison, but I've seen quite a bit of tennis over the years, and that things couldn't look more temporary. But here they kind of make it feel like it isn't necessarily. So I like that. And got to say, bigger room for fan zones, Phil. We both enjoyed that. And the Great Hall, far bigger, far more room, replicating the darts far more. Probably cost them a bit of money, I'm sure. But, I'm not doing the accounts. But for me, I think it has to be money well spent.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, that the big room around the back, with all those tables to play on. You can sit watching the big screen. Much better food options. I know a friend of mine who went last year was not impressed with the food options, but he was delighted this year. Although it's quite expensive, but that's London. But yeah, it was good. Really good. And even the players mentioned, I think there was more even hospitality areas. But yeah, no, it's a fantastic thing all around, and just continues to improve. Really, there's not much resting on the laurels there. It's not like it was struggling before, but they're doing really well to boost it each year. And yeah, so full of praise. Everyone was very impressed with everything in the tournament. Yeah, it was just a great hit. So yeah, they're not going to struggle to sell any tickets to that for any time soon.
No, I think that you never know, but things can change, but I think the success story, the Masters, just goes on and on. What a showcase for the game. I always remember that one of the guys from the WST saying years ago to me that they would now take someone there. And I didn't necessarily agree, and I probably still don't. I probably still think the Crucible is unbeatable, but I know what they mean. And I said, bit of name dropping here, Phil. Chatting away to Steve Dawson, my buddy from the World Snooker Tour chairman. I was saying, what you got to realise, Steve, as well. This is January. Wallets are empty and spirits are empty, or at least half empty. Phil, it's quite a bleak time of year, isn't it? But
Yeah.
but the good thing is, they sell them now as well, and they're going like hotcakes for next year.
Mm.
Last I heard, they just were just flying out the door. So great stuff. I suppose I've got that thing now. I think I'm just being too praiseworthy. You've got to keep the other side of it going as well. Now it's about boarding the other events up, isn't it, as well? The Masters is done. That's great. Yeah, little tickles here and there, but let's make the other events a bit better. I'm not just focusing on Brentwood. A few other things as well. But yeah, should we move on for the Masters? It was great, wasn't it? Great week, thoroughly enjoyable, and can't wait for 26 already.
Yeah, exactly. Huge money, bigger prize fund this year, 350 grand to the winner. So, yeah, very, very nice indeed. Although clearly, as we all know, non-ranking. So Shaun isn't guaranteed to be at the Crucible yet. So he might have to go through qualifying as Master Champion, which is probably quite unusual. I've not looked through history, but it doesn't seem like something that would happen very often. But yeah, no, just yeah, it was really good all through.
He's very aware of that. You mentioned it during the press conference on Sunday night. He also did say that he thinks he'll be there. He fancies
Yeah.
his chances of being there come Sheffield. Championship League back with us. Bit of a come down in some ways, but there we go. Judd Trump in action over the last couple of days. Judd's never a come down. I saw Judd play Neil Robertson in one match. That's a pretty high profile encounter. Jack Jones has made his 24th century. That's the most ever in a professional tournament. A bit of a weird one, the way this goes on. He seems to keep sort of losing and then coming back, Jack, which is basically how it's happening. But anyway, matches at that event will continue throughout this week. No doubt you've been following the scores a lot better than me. I saw Judd had a brilliant day yesterday. Maybe not quite as strong today. I'm not sure about that. I did see maybe he lost to Celt, I think I might have seen. But what's going on?
He lost to Celt twice now because Celt's won that group.
Ah.
Just as we came on air, I think beat Judd 3-0 in the final, and yeah, Judd won 5 of his 6 games in the group. He's only lost to Celt, but so he'll be back in the next one starting tomorrow. As will Jack Jones. He's played in every single one. It's a funny stat that most centuries in a professional game in a tournament because it's completely unfair. He's going to have played way more games than anyone else. But yeah, fair play. He's obviously playing well and racking up loads of money. Again, it's non-ranking, but he won't. He'll be very helpful. I know he's got a pregnant wife, so they're building up the baby fund very effectively. But yeah, Judd looked really good. I think the table's playing quite nicely. A lot of tons going in. So he's on that pursuit of the 100 centuries, 100 grand bonus. But yeah, that carries on the next few days, and then the final group is after the German. So I think they'll complete the 7 groups, I think it is, and then the winners group comes back after the German for where the champion will be crowned. And there'll be some big names there.
The big lanes continue to play. I noticed Lizowski and Gilbert among those entering the sort of days to come. German Masters, Phil, you just mentioned it there. Cracking tournament. Kyren Wilson says he's going to go and smash it now after not winning the Masters, going so close, of course. Well, we're looking forward to the big event at the Tempodrome in Berlin, aren't we? And just having a look at some of the matches. Well, Kyren's got Cheng Kai first up, while Shaun Murphy, the man who has just won the Masters, is kicking off his campaign against Liam Graham. John Higgins and Mark Davis might know each other's games by now, Phil. First played 30 years ago. I was having a look at the Grand Prix. Players from different generations when C. He takes on Ken Doherty. I really like the look of Wu Yisa Jackson Page. That's 21 years old, playing 23 years old there. World number 25 against world number 35. Wu's, of course, had some really good runs this season. Page has had a couple as well. Ryan Day, Ricky Walden. I thought, well, maybe the head-to-heads will give you some idea there. The only idea it gives you that we got no idea. It's 9-9 and they've been playing each other for a couple of decades. But yeah, some really good action to come, Phil, at what is always a special tournament, and you need one, don't you? After the Masters, you need something sort of big. This has got that, and I wish there was more tournaments in mainland Europe. I really do, but this is one that thankfully is. You never say in the bag. You never know in this sport things change, but it's building up some real history there now. Eh?
Yeah, the players absolutely love it. It's a real hit. Judd, I mean, I keep talking about this chat about Judd, but he said that he had it as third on his favourite venues after Ali Pali and the Crucible, the one to look forward to playing. He was calling for more tournaments there as well. And yeah, it's a real hit on the calendar, a real highlight. It's an interesting mix in history. A lot of big names. Yeah, I think Judd's won three of the last five or six, but then a few more unexpected winners. We're talking about Martin Gould and Anthony Hamilton. So who knows what to expect? Ronnie O'Sullivan's still in the draw. Whether he'll remain there, it's always been quite unlikely, but we'll see. And yeah, a lot of people bubbling up now. Now the Masters is done. It's all roads lead to Sheffield. So people will be desperate to find form. I think Luca Bracel is coming into form. He's the kind of guy who could go on a little run there. But yeah, plenty of interesting stuff to keep an eye on, and hopefully we'll see a bit more. I think sometimes you get to see the temperature, obviously, which is amazing. But we hear a lot about what's going on rounds, not in the arena itself, but in the building, and a lot of stores and merchandise. And obviously, the fans absolutely love it. So it'd be nice if we could see a bit more of that. I think on the coverage, we don't often get to, but you hear a lot about it. So that would be great. But yeah, one to look forward to. And yeah, we all will. And I don't know, it's hard to, as I say, is it going to be a big name or someone sort of more of a contender type? But this tournament's got history with both, so we'll see. Tell you what, who's going to play well? Jack Jones. He might be the sharpest man in the history of snooker after all his centuries.
Oh, a great line. Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much for that event as the Championship League in the last sort of days and weeks. Phil, do you mind if I sing?
Oh, never.
Okay, as you know, I'm not much of a singer at all, but I do love singing. I'd sing rather than talk if I had the choice. Here we go. Que sera, sera. Wherever I'll be, I'll be. I'm going to Germany. Que sera, sera. As if the German masters didn't have enough gravitas already, Phil. It's only got me going. That'll wipe some gravitas off it. Don't worry. I'm going for the closing stages, so I'm looking forward to it. Come and say hello if you recognise me, and I'm going to get that. It's Phil, isn't it? All that, everyone knows you're more famous than me, but I've got that little tiny bit of modicum of fame myself now. So if some of our German fans want to say hello, it'd be great to see them. And I'll try and bring some of that coverage from around the arena field, some of the merchandise. Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, it's a bit tired at the Masters. I did see a John Virgo wears a cue ball going T-shirt. I can see they're getting that for you. I didn't, but maybe later in the year. But thought was there. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I'm really looking forward to it, and a great city that I've got to know so well over the years. I'm really looking forward to getting a flavour of the snooker there. So big event coming up, Phil. Should say about another big event further down the line, the World Grand Prix. We've been wondering about television coverage. It's going to be on Eurosport, so a channel we know so well and have been praising during this episode. The home, I think it's fair to say, of snooker. I mean, the timings now are not really good for free-to-air television in probably lots of ways. So although they have covered events from the Far East before ITV going back, but that will not be on ITV. That will be on Eurosport. I can also tell you that Rob Walker will be doing the comparing. In fact, the promoters have asked specifically for Rob to do it. There will be very much a UK flavour to proceedings there. And it's a big one, isn't it? I mean, all those three are really. But, I have seen some people worry that it's lost a little bit of that, not identity thing, because it's out of the country, in China now. I'm not sure I see it like that. In fact, I did see a couple of things the other way, people that saying, yeah, the BBC is all great, but that's a little bit you guys in the UK talking again. So I'm always a bit aware of that. God, are we too much like that? So I don't think having the first one in China, the next two in the UK is going to be any skin off any of our noses. Probably going to be a good event, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. I think it's sort of a lot less neat, isn't it, that series? It was nicely set out from 32, 16, 8. When the tour got moved to 12, and that was made a bit messier. And now the Grand Prix got such a boost. I think the prize money for the Grand Prix is bigger than the players, which also feels out of kilter. So just sort of in structure, it's become a bit skewed. But yeah, I mean, it can't be a bad thing going to that amazing new place in Hong Kong. It's got incredible snooker history there, big crowds, and more money. I know it's messed it up a bit in terms of neatness, but it's all positive. Um, and yeah, that tournament had been moved around to a few places. Some have worked, some more than others. In terms of going to a much more impressive venue, then it's all good. But hopefully they will get the structure back into some sort of it was very aesthetically pleasing, wasn't it? Going down in halves, and the money going up. So if they can get that back into a nice neat order, then that would be good. But no, really looking forward to that being in Hong Kong. It sounds if they got Walker going, they're going all guns blazing.
The World Snooker Federation Championships taking place in Morocco, which includes the WSF Women's Championship. We just reached the quarter-final stage of that. I was having a look at the results earlier, and I noticed that Bayu Lu beat Narucha Forenfeld at 3-0. She actually had a 147 attempt. She missed the 10th black, got up to 73. That would have been a monstrous story. But obviously a good win. Rebecca Kenner beat Sophie Nix 3-0. Onyi beat Natasha Chaitin 3-0. And it was Mink Nutcharat, always a formidable competitor, beating Yang Men 3-1. I switched on YouTube and saw a bit of that actually. It looked like nice coverage on there. So that will continue. The WSF Junior Championship is well underway now. And the WSF Championship is to come. So yeah, we'll look forward to that. It would have, I mean, what a story it would have been. It's going to happen, of course. Of course it is. What a story if a women player gets a 147. Let's hope it happens soon. It wasn't today, Phil, but that was just getting a bit exciting there at 70 odd, eh?
Yeah, yeah, and Bayu looks like the good bet to do it first, but you never know. Minx had one we've seen that's on YouTube somewhere in Bangkok. So she's a threat as well. Yeah, the junior championships ongoing. Like you said, there's a talk card online there, isn't there? Certainly has been. Yeah, pretty sure there is. That's what Reves won last year, wasn't it? So yeah, and then the WS Championship coming up in a few days, and there's certainly a talk card on the line there. So yeah, yeah, interesting viewing. Nice that it's there on YouTube to watch. Never short of snooker for very long, are we? So that's great, great other options.
We haven't done too badly with time. We wanted to finish about now, and we're on any other business, so that's good news. Good news for us, in terms of what we wanted to do for this. Loads of good listening out there, just to say. Another shout out for the Wine Rat pod for me. I think it's good to have some more sort of female voices in the game, and they continue to do good work. A new podcast from Eurosport, Phil, the 147 SF Eurosport Snooker podcast with Rolf Kaib is going on the air. Of course, very well-known voice to German snooker fans and to many snooker fans around Europe. Should we say, of course, a Total Clearance podcast has been doing very good work for a long time. So now there'll be a choice of audio offerings for German listeners. And yeah, so that's good to see. Maybe you should give another plug for some of the stuff you've been doing. I know, yeah, got to say, I know it's a different sport, but loads of darts since the World Championship. You've spoken to the biggest characters in the game there, and yeah, sort of Taylor. Have you spoken to Taylor a lot over the years, or?
Not loads, no, once or twice, but that was it. That was great. Absolutely loved it. He cracks me up. He's just a funny bloke. But no, that was a real treat. I mean, what a stone cold cast iron legend of British sport. So that was a real treat. To chat to him just about very normal things. And yeah, no, been trying to do some more dart stuff, which has been good. So yeah, I spoke to Nathan Aspinall. Spoke to Callum Ridds, who I thought was a big star of the World Championship.
Big
That'll be
run,
out
yeah.
tomorrow, so have a look at that. Yeah, had a nice long chat with Judd today, so put a piece up. He was interesting on Byron's runner-up speech. Had some interesting comments because Judd's had a bit of criticism for his losing speeches in the past. So yeah, that was a really interesting take if you want to have a look at that. And then yeah, there'll be another one coming up from him, which was about his love for Germany, actually ahead of the German Masters, and also his new life, sort of mainly in Dubai, but partly in Hong Kong. It's a long way from Bristol or Romford, where he's been based before. So it was interesting to chat to him about that. And there'll be some other bits and pieces coming in the days to come, as there always is. So yeah, just have a look on Twitter if you can bear it these days. It's pretty awful nowadays, but yeah, if you can bear it, have a look at my feed.
Well, the guy running it's unbearable, that's for sure.
Yeah.
What a atrocious character, really. Well, yes, and we have a new president. We started this podcast with President Trump, Phil, but we thought, oh, well, at least that'll end soon. That'll never happen again. But that wasn't to be, was it? Let me just say about Radio Snooker, if that's okay. The numbers are going up. I'm pleased to say, slowly but surely. I produced a marathon commentary session, which I'm quite proud of. Really, I think I did quite a good job with it on the Masters final, and I spoke to a number of big characters in the game, including Cliff Thorburn. Now that was a privilege, and I have to say, very much like yourself, we've done this, quite a long time, and you don't. I don't want to say I get blasé, but you just forget it and think of it as a job, which it is, and not many moments do I stop and think, oh, that was good, but. I'm getting the phone out now, just maybe because I've got a visual aid, but getting this phone out and saying Cliff. He's seen the photo before, by the way, but the photo, that great one of him and all those greats in '75, and hit me zooming in and him saying, "Oh, that's Alex. Yeah, that's oh yeah. Look at that hair. That's brilliant." Bill Worthing telling me stories about each person. I thought, I hope you don't mind, Cliff, because sometimes I don't always do it, but I said, I've got to get some of this down if that's okay. So he was nattering away, telling me about being at a disco and singing some Santando and all sorts of different things. He was, great stories, lovely words about uh, Ray Reardon and Terry Griffiths, really paying tribute to those guys. A lot of moxie, he said about Ray Reardon. And he had some lovely things to say. I thought, so please do listen to that. Myself chatting to Cliff Thorburn. And Shaun Murphy looked me in the eye and said he got a 9 darter. So he did. He knew he did anyway, but that's more confirmation. And yeah, John Parrott in there talking about some memories. Our good friend Ivan Hercevich talking about the Masters and the growth in there. And Chris Downer, I have to say, brilliant on a number of matters. I really like Chris. I think he's a great talker. I love Ronnie to death. I think he's a great hero, great superstar sport, an icon, a genius. But Chris also isn't worried about the future without Ronnie, nor am I. And I'm not going to say this week was absolutely definitive. I mean, the viewing figures went down a bit for the final, for example, but I think we saw more evidence that the show will go on. So that's another nice interview on there, and maybe just thinking generally about other matters in sport. Phil, well, we've lost a giant of football and an absolute giant of sport, with Dennis Law dying at the age of 84. I have to say, Manchester United have had many heroes across the generations, but only one player known as the King. It's a profound loss for United, the last of their legendary holy trinity of icons, which also included Bobby Charlton and George Best. Best, Law and Charlton will trip off the tongue forevermore, but also a huge loss for Scottish football and really a significant loss for everyone who loves the game. So rest in peace, Dennis. As for matters on the pitch, well, European football is back this midweek. I thought that Liverpool had a championship-like performance at Brentford Field to get those late goals. That's the kind of thing that does happen when you win leagues. You get late goals like that. The Australian Open continues. The tennis down under. Novak Djokovic beating Carlos Alcaraz. That's a hell of a win to get in the last 4. Arina Sabalenka is going for 3 in a row on the women's side. Well, she's into the last 4 of that. And Australia, keeping on the theme of down under, have retained the women's Ashes, comfortably beating England to keep the urn. I'm not sure if anything's caught your sporting eye, Phil. The wheels of sport continue to keep turning, don't they? But yeah, there wasn't much of a contest in women's Ashes. Let's hope the men's Ashes are a little bit closer than that when the men go down there at the end of this year.
Yeah, let's hope so. Yeah. Yeah, no, I was down in Ali Pali for the Thursday and Friday, and a fair few people were keeping an eye on the Bahrain Darts Masters in the press room. So that's crossed over.
Littler
Some of
lost,
the
didn't he? He didn't win that Littler.
Yeah, he lost early on. Lost to Gerwyn Price and Stephen Bunting. Good win for him.
Oh, yeah.
So well done there. I expect Luke Humphries ahead of that as well. He was interesting to chat to as well. Um, but yeah, no, it was all snooker for me at the weekend. Bit of football. And then I watched the UFC, but so I've gone off the UFC quite a lot since there. It's extremely heavy involvement in the new presidential administration. But let's not get too far into that. But yeah, no, it was just Masters Central for me all week, and a very enjoyable week it was.
It really was. I see Netflix have got a big wrestling deal going on. That seems to be big for them. So
Yeah,
is it the Monday event or maybe a couple of
yeah.
days?
Monday Night Raw, yeah, no, big
Well, there we are.
figures. And yeah, they pulled out all the stops for that first one, got all the legends back. But yeah, no, that I mean that company goes from strength to strength, doing very well.
I wanted to have a word about a couple more voices. I know we often do it about broadcasters. BBC Athletics commentator Paul Dickinson, who was a terrific voice calling that sport, and a voice we know and love for generations, Johnny Walker, man who started on pirate radio in the 60s and worked for many years for Radio 1 and in recent times for so long for Radio 2, have both died. So rest in peace to both Paul and to Johnny. We're going to go. Phil, I think, thanks for your company as ever. We're going to catch up with your views, I think, next time. So keep them coming. Talking Snooker at yahoo.com or tweet us at Talking Snooker. And yeah, have a great week, sir. I salute you. Let's get this out there. People have been on our case. You can blame me a bit, really. We didn't do Monday. I think I was so. I don't think. I know I was. I was so broken from partly the snooker, but also late NFL nights. I wouldn't have performed well, and I made even more mistakes than usual. So we saved it for now, Phil. And yeah, bloody lucky to get it at all.
Yeah, it's amazing how quick. Yeah, Ronnie pulling out seems a million years ago now, doesn't it? Things move on so fast, but we always get there in the end. But thanks for listening, everyone. Thanks for waiting, and we'll be back soon enough.
Thanks very much indeed. Hope you enjoyed the Masters, everyone. Sure you did. We'll catch up with your views next time. For now, from your old friends, Phil Haig and Nick Metcalf. Cheerio.